We're going to dive into the really complex world of mood disorders, but we're not going to do it with a bunch of boring, dry definitions. Instead, we're going to follow a powerful, true story, a story that kicks off at what should have been the absolute happiest day of a young man's life.
Just try to picture that for a second. It's a wedding, right? There's celebration, family, so much hope for the future. And right in the middle of it all, the groom just starts weeping uncontrollably. The guests were confused, they were worried, but nobody, and I mean nobody, could have guessed what was really going on.
So to really get what led to that moment, we need to back up a little bit. We need to rewind just a couple of months in the life of this young man who we're going to call Ahmed.
Before all this happened, Ahmed's life was, pretty much perfect. He had a great job, a really loving and supportive family, and he was just about to marry the woman he loved. Everything was completely on track. But then, almost out of the blue, something started to shift. It began with something simple: sleep. Or, well, a total lack of it. Night after night, he'd just lie there, wide awake.
And it wasn't just the sleep. Pretty soon, other things started to slip away. He completely lost his appetite. The hobbies and things he used to love, they just felt empty. It was like a thick fog of disinterest had settled over his entire life.
And inside his head, his own thoughts were turning on him. He was just consumed by this feeling of worthlessness, completely convinced that he was a failure who couldn't do anything right. His family, trying to be helpful, just chalked it up to pre-wedding jitters. But what was happening was so much more serious than that. Now, what Ahmed was going through, it has a name: major depressive disorder. And this isn't just about feeling sad, it's a real clinical condition. It's often tied to a drop in these super important brain chemicals like serotonin and dopamine, the things that keep our mood balanced. At his own wedding, Ahmed felt like he was drowning, and yet this was only half of his story. Okay, so 6 months go by. His family finally gets him to a psychiatrist, he starts treatment, and then something really, really strange started to happen. The pendulum of his mind started to swing, violently, in the complete opposite direction. He went from having zero energy to having, well, way too much. The man stayed awake for 3 full days. He was talking nonstop, calling dozens of people a day, and all of a sudden he had these huge grandiose plans to start a new business, to open an office in Dubai, all without a single shred of a realistic plan. And this is where you can really see the two extremes, right? On one side, you've got that crushing low of depression, the sadness, the withdrawal, feeling worthless. But on the other side, you have this wild high of what's called mania, this extreme, almost euphoric happiness, endless energy, and these massive, over-the-top ideas. Ahmed's brain was literally swinging between these two poles. And this manic state, it wasn't just in his head. It had real devastating consequences. In this state of high energy and terrible judgment, he invested and lost 1.5 million rupees in a total scam. Now this is so important to understand. This wasn't some weird side effect of his medication. This was the other side of his illness finally showing itself. The diagnosis wasn't just depression anymore. It was something more specific: bipolar disorder. So what is actually going on inside the brain to cause these insane swings? Well, the answer really all comes down to chemistry. You see, our moods are pretty much run by these things called neurotransmitters. You can think of them as the brain's happiness chemicals, like serotonin and norepinephrine. They're like the brain's internal balancing act. And the whole thing is surprisingly simple when you break it down. When the levels of these chemicals drop too low, boom, you get depression. But when those same levels surge way, way too high, that's mania. It really is just like a chemical pendulum. And this helps us understand the different kinds of mood disorders, right? We've talked about major depressive disorder, that's that long-lasting low. Then you have bipolar disorder, the one with the dramatic swings that Ahmed had. And there's also something called dysthymia. You can think of it as a milder, but much more chronic, long-term kind of depression. So, let's get back to Ahmed. Where does this all leave him? What happened once everyone finally understood what was really going on? Well, once he was correctly diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 1, his psychiatrist switched him to a totally different kind of medication called mood stabilizers. And this was the key. See, the goal wasn't just to pull him out of depression anymore. It was to calm those wild swings and find that middle ground. And the fantastic news is, it worked. With the right diagnosis and the right treatment, Ahmed was able to get his life back. Slowly but surely, he returned to himself. Today, he is living a stable, normal life. It just goes to show you, Recovery is absolutely possible.
And here's why Ahmed's story is so important, why it matters way beyond just one person. In Pakistan, it's estimated that 1 out of every 10 people suffers from a mood disorder. Just let that sink in. That's millions of people who are quietly struggling.
But here's the statistic that should really stop us in our tracks. Even though these illnesses are so common, a staggering 90% of people affected in Pakistan get no treatment at all. Why? Because of stigma, a lack of awareness, and just not being able to get care.
And that just makes you think, right? Ahmed was one of the lucky ones. His family stood by him and they sought help. But what if they hadn't? What if they just dismissed him as being weak or crazy or worse? His story could have had a very different ending.
And that leaves us with one last thought to carry with us. Look around you, in your own life, among your friends, your family, your coworkers. With 1 in 10 people affected, the odds are pretty high that there is an Ahmed near you. Someone who needs understanding and support, not judgment. The question is, will you be the one to see it?